Hey guys, welcome to the Nerdist Podcast number 44. The song you're listening to is by the late Phil Park, under the band name Electric Swords, and the song is called Deep Space. So little business to get out of the way. Number one, I will be telling comedy jokes at Laughing Skull in Atlanta, November 11th through the 14th, and then the week after that, November 18th through the 20th at the Addison Improv. So come to those shows. As I've said a million times, it sucks to perform for 0 people. But I'll do it if I have to. So here's a little backstory on this show. I've been blabbing about this awesome show, Terriers, on FX, that my girlfriend and I watch. And one of the stars of the show, Donal, whose work I love, actually tweeted me back. And so I was like, dude, come on, the show, we gotta promote this for you. And he agreed. And then so I also had my girlfriend Janet Varney come on as well, who's one of the coolest, funniest people I know, honestly. She's on a show called Dinner and a Movie on TBS, and then also was a co-founder and producer of SF Sketchfest. Even if I didn't know her, I would say it is the best comedy festival in the country, and that takes place every January in San Francisco. So you can go to sfsketchfest.com to see what incredible acts have performed in the last 9 years, if you don't believe me. And then you will see. Oh, I'll show you with the internet. Anyway, here is episode number 44 of the Nerdist Podcast with the sublimely awesome and cool Donal Logue. Intro!
Now entering Nerdist.com.
So I think we're recording. Does Donal sound good? Do I sound okay?
Everybody,
you can hear us?
How do I sound?
You sound fine.
So for the first time in 44 episodes, welcome to the Nerdist Podcast. I am Chris Hardwick. This is Matt Myra and Jonah Ray. Janet Varney sitting in over there.
I don't know what I'm doing here.
You're here because you're here, and you're here because
to give the feminist perspective.
Yeah.
That's right.
I'm here to make you all uncomfortable.
I want to make fart jokes so bad.
And I plan to stand by that.
She'll make them too. I guess today's Mr. Donal Logue who's here. And I have to say it is thrilling that you're here because that means fucking Twitter works.
Yeah.
I went on Twitter. I started a mini campaign for your show Terriers, which
That's awesome.
Janet and I believe is one of the best shows on television.
Couldn't love it more.
And I think, and I what I'm about to say I know is the bane of your existence right now, and I apologize. When I saw the posters for it, I assumed it was a show about dogs. I know people are confused by that.
No, in a way, it's actually good to hear that, to embrace it, and it might be good for just to it's just to identify the elephant in the room. And the emperor is naked. There's a problem with that, and you can dance around it or whatever. It's just like there was and I got a little busted by walking around saying it's not a dog show. It's not a show about dogs, and it's like not about like. Whatever, they had their concept and they did it, and they always do really good campaigns. This one was confusing for people, so I need to call it for what it is. Yeah. It was a little funny on a more kind of narcissistic level where I've always been on shows where you've never been the beneficiary of like, oh, there's a bus that goes by with your face on it or whatever.
Right.
So my friends were like, oh, well, at least when you're on an FX show, that's the one thing that's guaranteed. If you're doing an FX show, your mug is going to be everywhere. And it's like, well, there's a dog. Michael and I are like these spots in the background, but like, so.
So the star does not star the Jack Russell Terrier from Frasier, who I think people assumed might have moved on to.
That's why I tuned in. I thought it was going to be Eddie's show.
The network president did say, like, well, the most disturbing thing is that people have left, actually, during the initial viewings, Nielsen style or whatever. And it's like, well, yeah, because the people who want the dog on the show
were attracted to it, yeah.
Yeah, they're leaving, man. The people that you want to watch the show didn't even give it a nanosecond worth of...
These old, like, flyover state couples who are like, I did not see one terrier on that show. Yeah. What happened? But it is a phenomenal show. And
also, in FX's defense, I feel like I knew, and I'm, of course, a little more savvy than maybe somebody who isn't in the business, but I knew that I wanted to look into what new shows FX had because they've been making great shows. So at least in that defense, marketing campaign aside, like I knew I want to know more.
And in defense of the marketing side of it might not be the issue at all. People might just be like, you and Michael Raymond James, we don't like you.
I don't. But you guys have such a. You guys and. I'm sorry. I don't mean to slobber all over your emotional knob on the show, but you guys have such an incredible chemistry together.
Yeah.
And the funny, so we first started watching the show, and I'm like, and who is this girl who's playing his sister? Like, what great casting! And I look it up, like, it's your fucking twin sister. Your twin sister is
my younger sister.
I thought she was your twin sister.
Someone had written that. Yeah, she's Karina, who was born in Methuen, Mass.
Oh, nice. It's very close to Lowell.
Yeah, my twin sister lives in Princeton. But it's funny because we used a picture of me and my twin sister, and then they superimposed the face of the actress playing her as a daughter, or like the young girl or whatever. But it was very odd. That was pretty amazing to be able to do. And what was weird was Sean Ryan had worked with Karina before he worked with me. He worked with her on Lie to Me and I think The Unit. And Karina was in the first 2 episodes of True Blood. Mm-hmm. But so they said, how do you feel about having a schizophrenic sister on the show? And I was like, that's fantastic. And they're like, well, how do you feel about your sister playing? I'm like, of course, she's great. And so they're like, great. And this was before this was kind of as the season was starting. And I said, so I can tell my mom and dad, right, who are always like, help Karina.
Sure.
I can tell my mom and dad that Karina's on the show, that this is all, and they're like, yes. I can tell my sister, like, yeah. And all of a sudden, I started getting these emails from people going, these different actresses saying, I saw the breakdowns. Hey, don't you think I'd be a pretty good fit as your sister? I'm like, my sister's playing my sister. And then I discovered that, no, they had to, it was open to casting.
Oh, for the union.
No, just the network. No one felt
We just want to see everybody.
It's like,
we want to know
when you do that to someone who feels like it's in the bag for them, they'll never get it.
Yeah.
It's like breaking their legs right before the race. And so somehow, she had to go through all that stuff and test for it and still won.
Oh my gosh.
And,
wow.
That's great.
But I was like, look, first of all, you're not going to find anyone better, straight up. Maybe not even Meryl Streep as far as I'm concerned. Like my sister's kind of, and I'm biased because I've known her since she was this ingenious 2-year-old that is funny as hell. She's incredibly good. And I said, who else is going to provoke an emotional response?
Yeah.
And I said, God forbid, look, you're going to do what you're going to do. You're going to cast who you're going to cast. But if they suck,
oh my God, no, those kind of characters can go so far, south so quickly if they're not. And she so underplays it in the most awesome way.
Yeah, that was funny too because we're so busy while we're doing it. We don't know what episode's coming up and stuff. And so, boom, all of a sudden it's like, ooh, my sister's here. Oh, it starts and she's doing a scene, and I don't know if we send her to the bathroom to get aspirin or. The guy's got a headache or this Linda's character. But so we go running in the bathroom and she's she's standing there weirdly behind, tucked up against the shower. And I'm like, oh, awesome. She's embraced the character. She's done her homework. She's doing something cool with it. Good, let's keep going.
That's awesome.
Now, I don't think, I'm pretty sure we've never met, but when you were doing the Jimmy the Cab Driver image campaign for MTV, I was hosting a show there at the time.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Which show?
The singled out comedy broadcast. It was a dating show. I hosted a ridiculous dating show on MTV.
Were you doing it were you doing it out of New York, out of those?
No, we were the only show that was at the time was based out of LA. There was really no LA presence for MTV, and then after a few years, then they started doing more and more stuff, and now they have this compound in Santa Monica. But it was really just. We were doing the show at the same time, and then MTV had a whole set, and this was what was so ingenious about them at the time, and I don't know if they still have it, but they had a whole department that was just devoted to image spots.
Interstitials, the guy named Abby Triculi.
Abby Triculi, yeah.
And they had Beavis and Butthead, and Dennis Leary had done those with Ted Demme, and then Toby Huss.
Toby Huss did the Sinatra one.
With Phil Morrison. He actually did a bunch of different ones where he was like a dude with long hair, and he's like, goat smell.
Randy the Redwoods, too. They did Randy the Redwoods.
Randy the Redwoods was more of that, a little bit the older era, but the beginning of that department. So before there was anything like viral, whatever, before any kind of potential YouTube or internet or MTV was really the only place you could go if you had these weird 45-second performance pieces or whatever they were.
So did you pitch that to them, or did Abby come to you, or how did you?
No, what happened was my friends Jesse Parrots, who was a bass player in a band called the Lemonheads, and my friend Clay Tarver, who was in a band called Volta. Anyway, my best friends from college in Boston. They always knew I could just riff in character and different characters. And then I'd come out here to ostensibly have some kind of normal acting career, which I had, I had a modicum of success, but they were like, look, the stuff sucks. It doesn't show what you can do. Then now you're auditioning for stuff that you don't like, and when you don't get it, you're mad. And so why are you doing this? Why don't you just come out here and we got a video camera, borrowed this guy's car, drove around and riffed, and it was actually Clay and Jesse who had the thought, like, let's not just do this for nothing. Let's do this specifically with the idea of doing it for MTV, without contacting MTV, and talk about pop culture. And it was fun. And it was easy because, like, videos were so amazing, and they provided this narrative that he could dip into, like it was all real, this world. And at the time, humor was so, not that it's changed a lot, but at some point you're just so beaten down by how hip and ironic everything is.
Oh my God, yeah.
That, like, everything's about Sergio Valenti jeans, or watching the Jerry Lewis telethon for the wrong reasons, or
right.
like listening to like mentally disabled people sing choir shit, or whatever it is. So like I'm about to say words that are not going.
I just put a joke. I just put a joke in my act about how I'm pretty sure hipsters eat with their assholes because they consume everything wrong. Like, I get so mad. Like, can't you just appreciate stuff?
I can't even say who it is, but at some point one night there's a guy wearing Sergio Valenti's and drinking a 40, and a pretty wealthy New York dude, and trying to listen to this, and this is like another person. This person's mentally retarded, and they're playing the cello, and it's like, at what point is there anything real in here?
Right.
Yeah.
And what if you took someone who was just a real, like, the weird thing is just walking naively through this world of incredible, self-assured hipness, and someone who's so not like that, but is so confident that they'd be fine with him and okay. And they kept pressing us to do, like, somehow have Jimmy interact with real MTV land. I was like, no. I mean, first of all, if anyone famous got in the car with him, he would just clam up. And I said, okay, we thought of something where, like, if Hole, like, say Courtney Love's band had a contest, like some viewer contest, and you could go see Hole play live backstage at some big event, that, okay, Jimmy can win this. And of course, like, leading up to it, like, what members only jacket to wear, and he goes to it, and I'm like, the way it has to go down is he has to be backstage, and just kind of be out of place and introduce, like, just blown off, and in a bunch of stagehands ways, some guy just yells at him, and he's going backwards, and he trips over, and he snaps the neck on Courtney's guitar. She calls him an effing asshole or whatever, and then he goes in the bathroom and cries. I'm like, this would work in our universe.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But in any other universe, it was like, yeah, he should just riff with these. I'm like, he doesn't exist in their world.
Right.
That's why he loves it so much.
Did they try to develop a show, basically? Because
You know what? There was a lot of that kind of talk of doing something at ABC, and then we were going to do a film at Paramount. And kind of unluckily for us, some guy named David Gale took over MTV Films.
Yep.
And so we had pitched it to Sherry Lansing, who was down with the film, and J.J. Abrams was producing it. And then David Gale, and because it was an MTV product, David Gale had it, and he kind of wasn't interested. He kind of was interested in making film and not movies that he considered were from these kind of inferior MTV characters or whatever.
And then he made Joe's Apartment.
No, the problem was he inherited Joe's Apartment, so he considered everything to be Joe's Apartment. And they would make that argument. I'm like, look, a human being like Jimmy McBride, with whatever backstory we've created, is far more interesting in the way that Ernest Borgnine was in Marty than talking cockroaches are your 5-second joke that goes no further. Like, a human being you can mine. And it never, and because it didn't happen there, and it kind of, it was hard to do it. You couldn't really do it anywhere else, and it basically just, went away. And maybe that's probably the best thing that happened for it in a weird way. But I remember being frustrated at the time because, but at the same time, it was a weird thing to be him, because people might not remember. People from our generation would remember it, but being oldies.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of heat to do stuff like talk shows as Jimmy McBride, and I would never have been able to do something like Terriers 15 years later. Like I always wondered why Paul Rubens would go on talk shows as Pee Wee Herman. I'm like, you're more, that's a character you invented.
Right.
What's fun is putting it away and being you, and then going like embodying it, and so because I was like, you live and die. You don't want to walk down the street in a bow tie and.
Yeah, but some people I don't know.
Well, you're in comedy, so you see that weird.
I'm more on the stand-up side, but I definitely see like with Groundlings, or like where Groundlings, which I feel is so like character-based,
right?
And I feel like
because that's what they want to take to Saturday Night Live,
exactly. Yeah. And I think that but for some people, especially working at the UCB, where you see a mashup of improv, sketch, and stand-up. You see, like, I'm not comfortable doing hardcore character sketches because I like to be able to just step out of it and be like, no, I'm just me and I'm fucking around.
Right.
Some people loathe the idea of having to be themselves ever. And so I don't know if that's Paul's case, but other people at UCB, they will not go on stage unless they're a character because they just need that. Like, that just makes them comfortable in some way. So I wonder if maybe that's part of what it is with him.
But if people get to know you as a certain character, that's also something that happens with the public and the industry, is they don't want to know that you're anything else. They don't want to know you're anything but
Well, that
Pee-wee.
was the point, was like they weren't interested in having you as a guest as yourself.
Right.
So then you're not a guest on anything. But the thing was like, that can't be what defines you as a person. I mean, there is something freeing though about adopting a character, and it's kind of like this weird Greek mask that you hide behind, and then you get really super honest with everything, and you can be like, well, I'm just, it was all improv.
Yep.
So I'm being very honest about some guy pouring a Dr. Pepper over my head and punching me in the face.
Sometimes when we put masks on, we're actually taking them off. Oh my God. We'll be right back after these. No, there's no.
But I would prefer like the UCB style of stuff. And in fact, Clay Tarver, who directed the cab driver stuff with Jesse, directed some UCB stuff when they had their show. What show was they? A television?
It was just
show?
Upright Citizens Brigade.
Yeah. And then I can't remember what it was on.
Comedy Central.
Comedy Central, that's right. Yeah. And Phil Morrison was directing some too. And
oh, he was? Phil's great.
Yeah, because back then I think Phil was going out with Amy Poehler.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and then, and I met Amy because we were going to do this movie after the Dow of Steve. We were going to do this movie called Flying V about this guy who ostensibly teaches heavy metal guitar to these kids in New Jersey, and then Phil's like, "Oh, my girlfriend's going to fill in a bunch of roles and stuff," and it was Amy. And you're like, God, she's got a lot of energy, man. She's funny as a 5-year-old. This Phil's girlfriend's really funny.
She's amazing. She's the best improviser I've ever seen on stage, I think. I know I have so many improv friends and I improvise, but the times I've seen her live on stage, I've just been blown away.
But I love that
this
about
is from another planet. This is amazing.
I think that's what's kind of cool about the improv world, and maybe this is against the character-based world or whatever, is, that kind of style, that feeling is like that real joy of getting together with other people and being like excited by what they're doing, and it's exciting to watch. And then the other side is this weird competitive world, the super competitive world of comedy that's just kind of nihilistic and weird and not supportive. But it's very. I don't know. I can only really do the stuff where you're in character and then you do monologues, like watching people do a group improv that comes together and just starts to jam in a way that you can't anticipate it's insane, and it's kind of such an amazing skill.
Yeah.
Everyone, when you go in, you just hate that, like, can't say no crap.
Yeah, the rules.
We're not walking into the laundromat.
Oh, wow, this barbershop's crazy. Nah,
Barbershop.
Yeah.
We're in a golf course, and it's very sane.
Your head's on fire. No, it's not.
No, no, that's ice you're seeing. What? Why would you do that? You're saying the opposite thing.
You're my dad. I'd rather not.
Well, then scene. Fucking scene. Just roll. But I know with UCB, it's just their thing is how fast they can figure out what they call the game. Like like when they're improvising as a group, it's dogpiling on that thing that they know. Like, all right, that's the game. That's where we're all gonna start riffing around. And like some of those, like Sean Conroy is fucking amazing,
and they're so amazing in different ways. I mean, the to be following the same set of rules, and to see how everybody approaches those rules differently and how they bend and break them differently, and the way they complement each other's personalities on stage, even when they're doing characters.
Yeah,
it's so helpful for actors, though. I mean, I was even talking to David Koechner, who does stuff over at the Improv Olympics.
Oh yeah,
yeah, we love David.
And he's so great, and so we were talking, and he's so fantastic. And I remember him walking out. Just for improv, like when he walks out, it's no blank slate. If he's coming into a scene, like you're floating out and you're making entrances, exit, he has such a clear emotion going on. And I was trying to tell my son, because he was asking me how to act and stuff like that. And I was, in a roundabout way, I was trying to explain like how whatever fuels you, that's what's fueling you, not this really weird cold world of black and white dialogue, because then you can start getting into I talk, you talk, and everything starts getting two-dimensional. But like this really make it emotional. And then once the emotions are kind of true, then everything else that's coming or going doesn't really matter. Like even in improv, some people can say things that are incredibly clever, but most of the time it's just the emotional commitment that makes me lose my mind and think it's brilliant.
You get busted for doing jokes in improv. Like real hardcore improvisers fucking hate it. It makes them mad when you come on and you throw like clever, witty lines into stuff, and they're like, well, now you're just trying to be funny, and you need to be in the scene.
Right, exactly. You're not in the scene.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting thing, because you mentioned game with UCB, and that's sort of the number one rule for them. But the Improv Olympic is so about being authentic and being honest and taking your time. That's kind of like in knowing a little bit about how the way they teach.
Yeah, and the IO has Koechner and Pat Finn and Adrian Wenner.
Well, Beer Shark Mice is one of the most
and
amazing.
Jack McBrayer. Like I remember doing you did the Armando. You've done the Armando show. I did an Armando show, which is a monologue-based improv where they have a guest
with your friend who was on Terriers.
With
Oh, yeah.
with Jean and Jessica.
P.S. Jamie Denbo, who's on your show.
Of course, Jamie. I just saw Jamie today. Yeah,
we love Jamie. We've been friends
We're also
for
talking
years.
about a couple of the guys from Convoy are on the show.
Alex Fernie.
Alex Fernie and Alex Berg.
The
Alex Berg, yeah, so good.
That's awesome. Yeah. But those where you come out and you do a monologue and then they improvise around your story. You have to tell authentic stories to give them things to improvise around. You can't come out. They hate it when stand-ups come out and do their act, because they can't improvise around jokes.
Nothing to hold this. And
information.
Even weird like Jimmy McBride. I mean, whatever. It's tangential, but when people, and this is so odd because you can be like the nicest person in the world and everything is cool and you understand, like if whatever misbehavior, whatever, it's like I get it. He's coming from a hard place. The guy's had cancer for 2 years. He's going through a tough time. Someone makes a bad comic suggestion to you, you want to kill him. Like, wouldn't it be funny if please don't say it. Keep your fucking mouth shut. No, it's not funny, dude. And this is fucking why, okay? Because this, it violates fucking everything
And thank you for wasting my time by having to explain that all to you.
Here you come again with your fucking funny idea.
If you have to preface anything, wouldn't it be funny if? Then it's probably not going to be.
And also, it goes along the lines too of like it's trying to be jokey or clever or quippy or weird like that, which always, that's. But if you start from the emotional place, if you come from, like even those watching those videos, it would be like, okay, here's a serious story, like it's whoever it is, Axel's really going crazy. And he's and he's got to get out of town, and now he's on an aircraft carrier, and he can't take this shit anymore. He's going to jump off the aircraft. Whatever it is, if you follow some narrative and you really invest in it, then you can have something to talk about that's completely retarded because it is what it is.
Right.
But if it's just a series of jokes and you never go far with cleverness, really, I think.
No, and that's why people who do, I found my biggest struggles with trying to do improv was that I have too much of the stand-up gene, which is a very narcissistic medium. And so you always want to, like stand-ups are notoriously bad improvisers in groups because you always have an urge to take control of the scene.
That was Robin Williams.
And why aren't they laughing yet? Why aren't they laughing yet? Why aren't they laughing yet?
Yeah, and you're not.
Robin Williams would do that improv stuff where they're like 3 people skiing. He's like, "You guys go back to the lodge." Because you know what, man? I've got the trajectory in my mind, and I'm not going to hear anyone take me in another direction.
Well, he used to show he would show up a couple years ago at UCB during the improv nights and just like ask if he could play, and he would just show up, and he would do that a lot where he'd just jump in a scene and go, and now, and then it would just be his show from there on out.
To be fair,
Was it funny? Was it good?
No, but he would like the times he would play along were amazing, and just to see him be that quick and that when he was inclusive.
From a good place. He came from a good place. He always had a good. Look, there's a lot of pressure on guys like that because they have a big comic moment back in the late 70s. And I remember watching this stand-up on HBO back in El Centro, California, like, this guy's genius or whatever. And then after that, he's got to be genius every time he opens his mouth. And when he came by, when I was in college in the mid-'80s, and he came by and he was like, we were in school in Boston, he's like, making a bad Boston accent and making 50 Boston like common jokes, like you all hang out on Boston guys, like fuck, we never been to Boston Commons, dude. We're across the river from there. You like read some book about like the place that the main, and then they'll feel familiar. And I was like, God. And from the perspective of like a super judgmental college asshole, it was falling flat,
Right.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to actually make the what was supposed to be a smooth segue, but is going to come out incredibly awkwardly. But I was going to say that I love Robin Williams when he relaxes into a role and when he's doing, like, really great acting in a movie. And I was also going to say that that is one of the things that we observed about, just to mention Terriers, and also just really anything I've ever seen you in. And I'm buddies with Kirk Fox, and I'm such a fan of your tennis movie, of Tennis Anyone.
Thanks. Which I thought was a good. I thought was a good flick. I thought he was fantastic in it.
It's so good. And I wanted to ask you about that in terms of talking about the difference between writing and having a character like Jimmy, and then having a movie that feels so personal. And maybe that's because I know a little bit about both of you being tennis players and how personal it was.
Totally personal movie.
And your mom taught tennis in Nigeria, I read online.
Oh yeah. My mom. Yeah, with the worst grip system known to man, like whenever she was teaching people how to hold a racket. But we're talking a long time ago. So, but I got turned on to tennis from my mom, and I met this guy Kirk Fox, who had played professionally. At what, like, where, how, and at what level, it remains debatable. Like,
absolutely, he cloaks himself in mystery.
I ain't gonna press you on that final where you supposedly beat Boris Becker. But the weird thing about Kirk is he could.
Yeah. And
we've played together. We've played a lot of pros. And when Kirk's on fire, it's like those guys have a hard time hanging with him. And he's a 6'5" comic, great. But the thing is, of course, when the pressure was on when he was younger, when the job is to be a really good tennis player, he's going to self-sabotage.
Right.
But when it's like, I'm just this guy who's 6'5" and I'm a comic,
I got
no pressure to be the guy who's good here. And it's like that for all of us in life in a weird way. Like, to go on the Tonight Show and sing would be horrifying. To go on or I used to do these things on the Late Show where I'd just be like the dude who shows up and I sing like a Loverboy song, and everybody's like jamming out, and then I leave, and they're like, "Wow, that was great. Who was that, Dave?" And he's like, "I don't know, Paul. I have no idea." But I'm like, to sing like that when you're just playing a joke on yourself, the pressure's off. So, but the thing with Kirk too was I found he had come from this place and he'd been doing stuff with Pauly Shore or something where it was very presentational. He always pushing hard to make these moments. And I'm like, acting doesn't exist in. Like, your lines don't exist in quotes. Like, it's like you're holding your breath and you're busting this thing out. It's this emotional terrain that you're just kind of cruising over, and it's, the words are almost not that important at that stage. And I think it was a really good exercise for him, that whole film. And the thing about Terriers was I just did a job that was really goofy, like some shark movie, even after Terriers, and I just kind of had to take a job, and I was worried about just acting again, like showing up, having lines, and it required real goofiness. And part of me was like, you know what, it may be good to get back to that, but some of those things that, like, acting's a very weird medium because as opposed to stand-up or music, which I love and would probably prefer in ways, your sensibility could be whatever. Your sensibility could be Elliott Smith. That's what you love musically. You just like really smart singer-songwriters, really kind of dark minor chords and interesting lyrics. And as an actor, that's your sensibility, but you're showing up for a guy who writes all the tunes for Ricky Martin and wants you to act them that way. That's how they're a screenwriter. That's the way they like movies. And so you're like, shit, man, and ain't your, And so you're showing up. People have wildly divergent tastes, which is also what's kind of cool about it. Because like on a show like Terriers, I have to say, weirdly, we were very well received by critics across the board. There's a couple. There's like some, and of course you get really personal. Like there's some guy from Orlando or something that hated it. And you're like, yeah, of course, because you live with your grandma and your cats. And like if what I did appealed to you, I would feel like I was doing the wrong thing. Like if the music my band plays is something that you'd like to listen to, then I think my band would suck.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like so. But
I write for the Tulsa Star Gazette, and I did not understand this at
Hate
all.
away, sir. Hate away.
We went to Tulsa on this weird promo trip that we did, and it was actually like we went to the Tulsa State Fair. It was fun.
State fairs are great.
Tulsa played Notre Dame and beat them, which sucked last weekend too. But yeah, so we it's just a weird. What was nice about this though was, and I think there was a little bit of a fight because at first. And I have to say, like, and this really is for Ted Griffin, who created the show, and he had written Ocean's 11 and stuff. And I never was like, I saw them, but I never, I'm not attracted to super slick and cool stuff. Like my favorite movie would be My Name is Joe, some Peter Mullen Scottish filmers. I like really kind of real life and gritty. And so Ted wrote this, and it's his world. And the pilot, there was a lot of very super specific dialogue that almost sounded noirish from the 40s, or he was found whacked down by the pier, like whatever. It's like San Diego, which is kind of where I grew up, and so as the series progressed, Ted really embraced writing more towards away from any kind of jokiness whatsoever, more towards the more poignant emotional scenes, and also for someone who writes films, because like people, even big time screenwriters, like they write these films and they're told to get off the set.
Yeah.
Or people take them and rewrite them or whatever. But like when you're in television, when you create it and you're down there on the set every week, now you start to see like midstream, like, oh, we could do this and they could say this and then you can go there, and it's this ever changing dynamic, so it's kind of an exciting world. But he started writing more, I think, for the kind of the emotional veracity of the show, which I think is the thing that surprises people the most about this show. Is just like, holy shit, I'm a kind of tough guy, and I when your sister goes back to the insane asylum, I'm busting into tears, whatever it is. And it's like, because it feels like pretty raw in that regard. So, and it's hard because when things are really when it's overly clever, and it's a hard thing because it's hard to write. I get it. But when it feels like someone's pushed their chair back from their computer with that, like, what a line. And I was like, and my sister's so brave this way, and I'm not in terms of the right. There was shit that we used to do where it's like, I see her, her husband's dead, or I've slept with this woman, and it's like she realizes what I've done, and there's some speech about how you'll never finish the hole in your wall at your house because that's the kind of man you are. It's like, hey man, you pay us to do it with our eyeballs. We don't need to say this shit. Right. It kills the moment saying it. Let us try it without dialogue.
Oh wow.
Let's see how much you can do. Because my sister was always doing things like, I want to go back up in the attic. I feel safer there. I'm much safe. She's like, you pay me to convey that without dialogue. Which is true.
Yeah.
And it's like...
My God, David Mamet would just shoot her in the head. He's like the opposite, right? He makes it all about... It's all about the words. The words!
I think that Mamet...
The fucking words.
I think that Mamet, yeah.
I can't do it. I mean, I can't espouse that belief.
I went to drama school in England briefly, and it was like... It's called the British American Drama Academy, and it was kind of like... National Lampoon Drama Academy in a way.
Was that Bada in Oxford?
It was in Oxford, but they had moved it to... They had a year-long program at Regent's College in London. And so I showed up like 2 days late, and my first thing is we have some drama criticism class taught by some guy who writes for The Guardian or something. So I just came in at the end of his thing, and it was so arrogant about how basically, like, English playwriting is genius because it's emotional and it's intellectual and operates on these different levels. There are some decent American playwrights, basically like as if you're watching gorillas chanting to themselves and beating their chests, and like, it's just so fucking dismissive of American writing. And And I was like, I take exception to that, like in Mamet and this, and you're just throwing those names around like Mamet.
Sure.
Mamet. And so then we go through the room and introduce ourselves, and the guy sitting next to me is like, I'm Tony Mamet, and and you're talking about my older brother or whatever.
Whoa.
And he became a really good. He actually produced the tennis movie that Kirk and I did.
Nice.
Tony, we've remained friends, and so I hung out with his brother too, which was, as a kind of college theater guy, like there's no greater. There's like Sam Shepard and David Mamet,
Right.
and it is weird because I wonder. With David Mamet, you have to think there's an element. You know what? That's bullshit. Because his whole thing is a buddy of mine, Jamie Foley, directed Glenn Ross, and he goes, it was crazy directing all those guys because they're all different. It's like Ed Harris and Al Pacino and Jack Lemmon and
Alec
Kevin
Baldwin.
Spacey,
Oh my God.
yeah, and like it goes on, and Alan Arkin,
Yeah.
and so Ed Harris and Alan Arkin were kind of they were having a hard time figuring out what to do with this one scene. And they're like, well, let's call David and let's figure out where we were right before this and where we're going. He goes, it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is the words right there. And there's an element where I'm like, there's the people who are so into the whole methody that you were
Right.
like, no,
I get it as a reaction to.
there's a bit of both, but you can't
Right.
buy into that entirely because it
Yeah.
doesn't work emotionally. But you need some toehold.
Right.
You need something more than just the word floating.
But that's what I
space.
think because on your show, which I would not consider a comedy, there are genuinely organically funny moments that come out of the interactions that you guys have, and I don't feel like it's too. I don't ever feel like that's too clever. Like when I'm watching an Aaron Sorkin show, where I'm like, people don't talk that way.
Yet I love Aaron Sorkin.
I know you do.
I know.
Sometimes it is good to revel in human cleverness. Like if you watch the, I'm trying to think of, I don't know why I'm spacing, but it was the play, and they did a film with Peter O'Toole where he thinks he's Christ, and I'll come back to it. But it's just so viciously clever and brilliant that you have to. There's a little bit of I'm going to stand back and watch.
Right.
Even Aaron Sorkin in the West, like it's just the dialogue is flying, but it feels weird. It's hard to deliver.
Yeah.
And you fight it all the time. And I mean, we did do. Those guys started writing on Terriers. The kind of like the thing that Sean Ryan and Ted told the writing room was like, don't try to write to be funny, other than writing something that one guy thinks will crack the other guy up.
You see that. You totally see that.
Or we'll switch it where they say, are you going to visit me in prison? And it's like, not for conjugal visits. It's like, dude, only for conjugal visits. Like, I'm just switching. How would we?
Right.
And you're also like, I know, anytime we're doing a scene, it's like, I know 500 ways to bust up Michael. Like, if we could just float off book. And we were talking about that.
Yeah, earlier.
In regards to the guys on UCB who are on the show, because the really brilliant improv people, when they finally act for the first time and they're tied into this box of words on a page, you watch these guys who are used to being like jet planes so boxed into something, and I'm like, that's what you learn, and you learn what you do is you have to give the writer what they wrote. That's only fair due, and you have to find 50 different ways to try it. And then when everybody feels comfortable, then you're like, hey, can we try one just for the hell? And it probably won't work. Most of the time it doesn't work, but like try one free.
Well, it's good to have the safety net of, the actual thing that was written. And then from there, if you have time.
The worst thing is for actors is, when someone writes something, you guys write, you put together, it's this, especially for TV shows, it's like this mathematical equation that's going over 13 episodes. And they're building all these brick buildings, and everything's kind of important for somewhere down the line. And to walk in and just go, this is bullshit. This guy would never kick my character's ass. That's like the kind of stuff you'd hear that about like Melrose Place, like Jack Wagner walking in. I would never get my ass kicked by a guy like that, or whatever it is. I don't know. I don't know if he actually ever said that. God bless him. But like, I can imagine shit like that going on.
Of course, that happens.
Right.
And it's such a nightmare for the writers. They don't want actors near the writer's room because they want to manipulate the stuff in their direction. And, so we had a good relationship with the writers because we hopefully showed them a lot of respect. And then they start listening to what you have to say about certain things. Nothing major. But, the show was freeing that way. And it felt like it's easy to act when you just rely on your own sense of humanity or whatever, it's not really that difficult.
Did you audition for the show?
Yeah,
or
did you guys know, and also did you know each other? You
Or
can
how
answer
did-
both of those.
Yeah, no,
did you
yeah.
and Michael know each other before?
I didn't audition for the show. I just met those guys and had a long conversation with them, and they felt like I met Ted and Craig Brewer, who directed the pilot, and Sean Ryan, and we all got along really well. And they said, "You want to do this thing?" I said, "Yeah," and let's start auditioning everybody else. And Michael, so Brits were the first people who came in, and Michael was the first guy to come in, and we had worked on a show called Life together.
Oh yeah.
We love
And he
Life.
played a-
Oh yeah,
We
Life.
love
Oh,
Life.
that was another fucking
Right?
great show.
He played like a he and Rachel Miner, who was also in the pilot of Terriers, played this kind of weird murderous couple who had a museum to the macabre and
Yeah.
in LA, and they where they had like things about serial killers and stuff. And so we were doing a scene, and I hadn't really met them formally. We just came in. We're doing an all night shoot, and I was just watching this guy watch me in the scene, and I was like, this guy's intense. Like he's there's something kind of unique about this. And you can, it's just his games at a different level. Like there's a lot of really good people, but I was like, shit, this guy's really good. And I was at the time adapting this Kerouac novel called Big Sur as a screenplay. I got hired to do that.
Also from Lowell. Anyway, go ahead.
Also from Lowell, Mass.
Jeez, I
Nice.
get it.
Yeah.
People are from there, Matthew.
You hired the Lowell.
So he was a huge Kerouac fan, and we got into the conversation. And the interesting thing is, like, a lot of people hate Jack Kerouac and hate the Beatniks because they haven't read his stuff, but they just know that they hate that whole style of this.
Yeah, they hate the people that love him
Right, they
rather
hate the
than making
fans. I'm
their
like,
own
hey,
decision.
Jack Kerouac hated those people too. That's why he wrote
Right.
Big Sur. He wrote this book On the Road. It took 10 years for it to get published. So by the time it got published, he's like this old alcoholic, like late 30s guy on the verge of death, basically. And then all these young guys are like, "Hey, Jack, man, let's do, let's
Snap on your fingers, man."
let's fight." Yeah, exactly. And so I'm like, but he got it, and so we bonded over that. And then I saw him at this audition, and I just kind of knew that this is the guy you can run down the road that we're running down in Terriers Land with. And I think of a lot of the other guys who came in who were fine, good actors and stuff, but it would have just been such completely different. And some of it was like some of the guys were kind of funnier. And it was interesting because some of the guys were really big, but they were big, but not like the guy's supposed to be dangerous. And like, well, he's big. I'm like, there's such a difference between dangerous and big, and it was just kind of a weird. It was. He had to fight to get it in a way he probably shouldn't have had to. But the problem with Michael is that instead of Hank being like this much older guy with this really kind of 22-year-old fresh-faced, like it's like mentor relationship between these two. It was almost like these two guys who were way too close in weight and feeling and vibe and whatever. So they were fighting against the casting a little bit, but the president of the network was like, "Look, it wasn't the show that was pitched to us initially, but the best actor is going to win this part." So Michael
It's nice to
gets
hear
it.
that.
It is, isn't it? That is.
And
It
it's
really is
true.
nice to
You know
hear
what?
that.
For all the people out there who think it's all completely arbitrary and bullshit, it's not at all. A lot of times the person you want to get the part just completely, because I've been on the other side of the table a lot now. You're praying for them, or I'm reading with, and you're like, let's, and it's just like, the process is so difficult. We've all
Yeah.
been through it where it lends itself to just sabotage,
Yeah.
So a lot
it
of
does.
people like melt down when it's time, and you see the person who you think probably isn't ultimately the best for the job, but they have their bugle stand-up moment when it counts,
That
and
fucking
they win the
audition, the
part.
audition process is such a
Designed
different
to-
muscle
yeah.
than actually being actually.
Well, everybody's
working.
also too there because like if I'm comfortable and I'm there, like tennis for Kurt, whatever, I'm
Right,
jamming. But when the
right.
heat's on, I'm like, well, I think that's they invent this pressure cooker to put people.
And you're-
It's the thing. It's like, do that thing. Be funny. Do that thing. You got this voice. You'll love it.
In a completely inorganic
it
environment.
makes you
Yeah.
angry.
And also somehow hate yourself. Like, not just hate the person who's
I
putting it
know,
on you,
it's
but
the
also
most-
hate yourself. Like, I'm a piece of shit.
But
What am I doing?
But it's so right on. I love what you said earlier about you're auditioning for stuff and you're not getting it, and you get fucking mad. And you're like, well, why wouldn't
Why
they?
do I care about this
Why
thing that I
can't I
don't
be
care
a
about?
fucking dude in space?
I'm that guy. I'm that guy.
You auditioned for Dudes from Space?
No, yeah,
Dudes Space.
yeah, audition for Fastronaut. The Fastronaut show.
Oh, I've
that we wanted.
auditioned for everything.
Do you still audition, or do you?
Yeah, of course. Like I did go through a long period. well, I was on Grounded for Life for a long time, and after the Dow of Steve, like I did go through a period for probably 8 years where I didn't audition. I would audition for films, or I didn't audition for TV or things like that. I auditioned for this HBO pilot I did right before Life called 1%, a biker show, and which we did and I loved a lot, but they didn't end up doing. And I don't mind auditioning at all, because I also feel like, and you guys probably feel the same way. It's, they have a right to see if you're the person, the right person for this, and there could, and if I feel like I'm actually supposed to go meet someone for some job, and I'm really like, I don't do this thing that they want done well. Like, there's a guy who can play, like I remember being up for something called NY70 that the guys from Life did, and it was to do basically the French Connection and do Popeye, like to do the old Gene Hackman part again. And Donnie Wahlberg ended up doing it, who's a friend of mine, and I was like, Donnie's better at that. Like, there's a kind of thing, there's certain parts that friends of yours, like, I'm like, he's, to them, that's their cloak. That's easy for them to put on and let them run with it. So if you act, just get used to auditioning and embrace it, because if you pray you don't have to, you're going to get shot.
Well, first of all, we just watched Saw 2 the other day, which Donnie Wahlberg is fucking awesome in.
He's so good.
I know, I mean, like, I don't know if he would, I don't know, whatever. He's great. He's phenomenal.
Yeah, the Saw
to watch.
stuff was hilarious, because I think it was just so successful that he couldn't. And they were like, he's the only guy that they keep bringing back, or whatever it was, because he survived. But he's like, at some point it's too much money or whatever it is to walk away from. And but he's doing a show called Blue Bloods in New York right now.
Oh yeah, Blue Bloods. I remember reading about
With
that.
Tom Selleck's mustache.
Yeah, Tom's on that. Tom Selleck's on that.
No,
Tom,
just
I just said
mustache.
Tom like I know him. Oh, Tom's on that show. No, Tom.
But it's weird, because Terriers is like, it just feels like one of those. There's a lot of those things where I just can't myself. And they're all, they're friends and they're doing these shows, but there's so many of them where you're like, God, dead bodies aren't dead bodies, and danger isn't danger, and cleverness, it's just, you just feel so fraudulent that you just feel like you can't do it, like it can't even come out of your mouth, like, and the thing is, people respond to that stuff. They love that shit. And I don't know, and maybe it's just super comforting for them to have certain shows like that, but
it's all this, or it's sort of all that world, or it's all.
Well, and I mean, listen, I think at this time in human history, we are more inundated with data at all points, all the time, and so I think just a coping mechanism for people is that they just need to shortcut things. And so if they instantly know, like, whatever this. There's a crappy sitcom on, but I know exactly what it is, and I know what to expect. I don't have to do any work.
But what's funny about what you want to explain to people about Terriers, at least from my perspective, is in terms of, like, maybe if they don't know where it fits into that, is that what I like about the chemistry, particularly between you two, but about the whole show, is that you really get this sense, the writing's great, but you still get this sense that something's happened right before the scene that you pick up as a viewer watching, and that something's going to continue happening afterwards. And I feel like that's really hard to do, to have good writing and good acting and I feel like I'm picking you two up in the middle of a conversation, like you've already, like you guys are referring to something with your eyes.
Well, because we know each other.
Just happened.
It's kind of, it's creepy. Like, it's like this weird, creepy, symbiotic thing where we were very close. We got the part. And two things were happening. One was we were, like, fully aware that it's a huge gift to be able to have a show on the air, that you're given the reins, especially two guys who have to run in every scene with it. It's like, they're giving you this whole forum for you guys to do this thing. So we weren't going to take it lightly. We actually rented a house down in San Diego together and lived together and worked on this 24/7. And, we were super prepared. And when people would show up and they were like, well, they had the script for 6 days and they were, I don't know, I'm a little loose on it. It's like, why?
Yeah.
We had 8 pages today, dude, and there was no problem, man.
It
was like we were
shows.
kind of like that. Like,
In the pilot,
I think
it
people
shows.
were a little like, whoa. I guess you guys are serious about this or something. Shit.
Yes, it's a
Remember
job.
after I saw the pilot, I was like, I feel like the show has always been on. And I never say that
Well, it
about
was weird
pilots
'cause we
because the
worked at-
actors and the characters are like, who, what?
And
are
Jamie
we?
was someone like that was because I auditioned with everyone. Jamie was someone I had worked with before, and I auditioned with everybody for a couple of weeks. So I read with hundreds of people, and so by that time I felt very comfortable doing scenes with everybody that I was doing scenes with on the pilot. And then Michael and I had this kind of rapport that was deep, and so there was something about it, and I was like, I wonder if this is an interesting experiment in this way, because I wonder if these intangible elements that you really do internally believe add something to something is something that can be picked up on by an objective viewer, which I guess it was. I mean, it's not doing well ratings-wise, but the one thing was like, people were like, whoa, man, that's some heavy-duty chemistry between people, or...
I hope they give it. I just hope that they recognize the inherent value of the show, and I just hope they give it a chance.
Well, the weird thing is
when people find it, it'll be good.
FX more than anyone recognizes the value of the show. I mean, they're huge fans of it, like John Landgraf or Danielle Woodward. All the executives from FX were always in touch with us about, like, just want to send you an email, saw the dailies from yesterday. This is long before the show airs, and like, wow, we look forward to the dailies here more than anything. It's incredible, and so they're always been supportive. The difficult position they get put in as business people is their boss is saying, what's with this? Like, you can't have a
the
sentimental.
advertisers are mad, or
It's like it's a job, and they're aware that's probably the kind of show too that if it doesn't survive, that people will say, wait a minute, like I just got turned on to this. This is what happened. What happened was you weren't there from the get-go, and when people needed you, or however Nielsen works, but I can't say that they haven't been incredibly fair and supportive, and they're not super rooting for it as we speak, and they helped us put together this weird tour Michael and I did. This cross-country tour, we were trying to like raise
who was
awareness.
I talking about that? Maybe it was Nick Kroll? Someone from the league. Who?
Oh yeah, we ran into them in Chicago. Yeah. Steve and all them. Yeah. And they're cool, man. That's a good group of people.
It's a great group.
Yeah, I knew Steve from before, but like really cool, really nice, and whatever. That was fun. We ran into them in Chicago, and so.
I mean, I think I honestly, and they're obviously not paying me to say this, but I think FX is fucking killing it right now with shows like between your show and the League and
Louis.
Justified and Louis C.K.'s show.
Damages was one of my all-time favorites.
They
believed in that show.
But that's it too.
So
Damages
hard.
was the same.
They gave
thing.
it more than they could have,
And they felt like Damages is probably a little less than our show, though. If you came in the middle, it's a little confusing.
You're screwed.
Right.
It's
But
so serialized.
it was so brilliant, and the guys who did it, this guy Dan Zellman and the Kessler brothers. Like Dan was one of my best friends in college, and I did a bunch of plays with him, and like the greatest actor, actor schmacker stuff. Like that guy was the god actor of all time, and married Deborah Messing, and I think after Angels in America and some plays he did in New York. He's such a tortured artist as an actor. He's like, I'm not doing it anymore. And he went into writing, luckily for Damages and stuff. But the guy is, no one knows. They're like, who's the best actor you ever worked with? Like, oh, your boss, Daniel. Like, what? Dan Zellman, that executive producer guy? It's like, the guy's a friggin' manimal on stage. And I love it too. Like you're talking about watching Amy or people work. Like I remember
so
doing plays with all these
invigorating.
people coming up, or even scenes in film and stuff. And you're like, man, I'm so jazzed by it. Look at what I just did this movie with called Oliver Sherman up in Canada, this tiny indie myself, Garrett Dillahunt, and Molly Parker. And it's about two vets, and it was incredibly emotional, very restrained emotional thing. And also something happened to me, I don't know what it was, about some scare with my kids or something a couple of years ago, but I was like, I don't have a funny bone in my fucking body anymore. And I'm not into goofy shit. I'm not into the only thing I'm interested in doing is this adult style world I'm living in my brain. But we did this movie, and this guy Garrett Dillahunt, who people, he's on Raising Hope now.
Yeah, he's brilliant. He was on.
He was on Life as the Russian bad guy.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like
I have
the
a friend
guy
who follows everything he does because he worships him.
He is brilliant, and
Yeah.
I was sitting across from this guy doing scene after scene, I'm just like, man, this is awesome. Just thinking it is awesome what you do, and it's cool to be like, it's cool to feel that way about the people you're working with, you know. And Terriers had a lot of that. Like everybody's game got really stepped up, and it was kind of a thrilling environment. And the sad thing is, and it's so selfish, but like, you know, this group of people, because we're all like circus people who have these different traveling circuses, we have like 170 people that you work with 16 hours a day. Everybody's marriages are in trouble because they're never home. Everybody's in shit, so you have each other, and you're like, and this is their, you know, there's not much filming in San Diego. This is their gig. If the gig goes again next year, the kids are in school, everything's cool, and if it goes away, so they're going, please, like, oh, thank you so much for driving around the country in a bus and trying to promote the show, like, you know, to keep it going. But at some point, though, you know, it's like, well, the work was dignified. The other shit is not that dignified. Begging people to come watch a show, you know?
It's all the other stuff. I mean, it's like, it's stuff, you know, that I feel like I have to do on the podcast, or stuff with my stand-up where it's like, no, you gotta market. You have to learn. It's like, I didn't want to be a marketer. I didn't.
Because the people do jettison themselves to such incredible positions of power, where not just power, but they have a platform to make what they want to happen.
I guess so.
But it feels like the most talented, the people with the big hearts, they just can't do that because they feel whorish about anything that they do in that realm.
I mean, listen, I promote my own shows on Twitter, and I swear to God, every time I do it, I feel guilty about it.
We got on Twitter, like my friend was like, you got to get, I wasn't on Twitter, and I started, I was like, oh man, I got 100 people, I got 200 people, you know, there's people, millions, you have millions of people, and it's like, but it was such, you realize like what a powerful tool it is. People coming to the Chicago event were like, I came because I saw a retweet about, and you're like, okay, man.
Well, you have no idea. Like when I was tweeting about your show, and then you tweeted back to me like, "Hey, thanks for supporting the show." Like I showed Jen, I'm like, "Hey, Donal tweeted me." Like that never would have happened with any other social networking.
It was such
tool.
a fast. I mean, really, going from like me saying, "Oh, I really wish that you could," you know.
I said like I got on this crusade. You know, like I want to help the show. I don't know if I can, but I want to try.
Like we were like talking about it because we were on the bus, and my friend Steve's kind of the one who's Donnie's friend. He's like, Donnie's got 250,000 people. He's doing this Twitter stuff all the time. It's helpful, man, because they would do club appearance, whatever. It's kind of a different world. But so he was like, hey, look at this guy, you know, like meaning you, and maybe this woman Diane who did the Surf Report, or a couple of people who do blogs, the entertainment blogs. And it was like, oh, writing just the best, most superlative stuff about the show. And it was like, hey, thanks so much for the support, because, you know, one thing that you say is reaching so many people immediately and who are checking it all the time. It's so important to us. Like this is it. You know, this is how people reach people now, and to blow it off is kind of foolish, you know?
No, it's great, and I don't have any problem. Like I'll tweet about your show 100 times. I always get self-conscious about tweeting my own stuff. Where I'm like,
we all are.
I'm sorry, I have to do this, you guys, but I need to promote my thing now. But
it's crucial. It is. But I feel it feels very weird because, of course, you would just want to be like, I do my thing.
Yeah.
You see what I do. I don't.
Yeah.
I'm not offering a Burger King Happy Meal with it, or whatever, you know.
Well,
but
just,
like,
you know, it's
just in the garage making it.
It's another side of it. Like if you want to, I mean, you know, I feel like stand-up is the most distilled representation of how the business works. If people show up to your shows, you can perform.
Working. Yeah.
And so it's, you know, it's like on a broader sense.
now,
like
Kirk said it's harder right now. I don't know if that's.
Well, it's harder in the sense that there are less comedy clubs. I mean, there are less comedy venues, and a lot of comedy clubs. You know, like when the recession hit.
The recession just crushed.
Comedy clubs are the first, you know, like some of the first things to get hit because they're expensive and they're sort of a luxury, and it's something people do when they have extra money, and they're like.
And people would argue the other. People would say, well, it's comedy club. People want to laugh, and you know, but it's not true.
They'll
They gotta
watch
be able to
their
afford
movies
to
at
laugh.
home that they have.
Well,
that make them
or they'll
laugh,
save
or
it.
watch the
They'll
internet.
save it for like the handful of people coming through town that they know. Like if Jim Gaffigan blows through town, or
Right.
you know, or someone, or Patton Oswalt.
By the way, how amazing is it? Like the world doesn't know, like guys you've never heard of are making massive livings singing the penis song to 40,000 people or whatever. I was like, who? What? Yeah, dude, I'm flying on this private jet to this thing to do this for 80,000 people.
That's how I am
I'm
about
like,
Vegas.
Who?
Like,
What?
Vegas? Like, these people are making millions, and I've never, like, I didn't know who Jeff Dunham was for the longest time.
Well, you could always, listen, if you would do yourself a favor if you could unlearn that.
Well,
Hey, you racist puppet! Oh, I'm a puppet! Oh, please, no, come on.
it's possible I've still never actually seen him do anything. I just became aware.
What about
of who he
Yakov
was.
Smirnoff? Is he still running?
Branson,
He's Branson, Missouri, yeah.
Is
He's
he
still in
Missouri?
theater.
Oh yeah, Branson's.
Well,
that's
because
where you
it's
go.
funny, I was just had a talk with Weird Al about that the other day, because Weird Al tweeted something out about, like, he made a reference to Yakov Smirnoff.
So
like,
funny.
And all these people were like, come on, man, Yakov's doing a theater. And I think Yakov tweeted him, and he was like, oh my God,
geez.
I didn't mean to
Sorry.
open this can of worms.
BJ,
It's okay.
Okay.
BJ Novak, he said one of my favorite jokes about Yakov Smirnoff. He's I just recently met Yakov Smirnoff's wife. What a cunt!
BJ
Oh
Novak.
my God.
So, like, I have two quick things that I want, and then we're at the hour, and I don't want to dominate too much of your time. But first of all, do you? I guess at this point you have a pretty good internal barometer. If you're doing a scene, I don't know. Do you have anything that kind of goes off that's like that was a solid scene, or are you hard on yourself, or when you watch stuff afterwards, are you like, oh, that actually looks better than that turned out better than I thought it was gonna? Like, what's your internal measurement system?
I think it's pretty. I think you can tell fairly well when it's. I think I know the barometer's kind of in tune with what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
I do love it though when like you're working with someone really good who. There's this guy named Alan Taylor who's a genius director. He directs a lot of the Sopranos and stuff, and he's like, I know what you're trying to do, and I can only imagine what it feels like in your heart and mind. And,
Oh no!
and, dude, and I love, and it's fun because you know he loves and supports you,
course.
and you're not conveying any of it. And you're like,
That's
okay,
a great note.
I got thick skin. I got it. I'm like, yeah. Like, is it coming through telepathically or not or whatever? I'm like, okay, cool. You know, that's fine. It's like, and better that way than someone's like, ooh, how do I put it in terms of colors to you? I'm not an airy, fairy, weird, elfish.
Right.
Like, you know, just friggin', what do you want? What do you want?
Or just not say anything and be like, I guess that's the best we're gonna get, and not have not.
Sometimes,
come
the weird thing
forward.
is like funnier, faster is a good note.
Yeah.
And like people go, I hate it when they say it fast. I'm like, no, it's good, dude, because the pace needs to get picked up because it's fucking dying. You know? And then there's this one guy, God bless him, we were doing this movie with this dude, Terry George, this who wrote Hotel Rwanda and all
Okay.
these, and some other son. He was an IRA, he had been in prison for 8 years for kind of suspected IRA involvement. It was more just he was one of the guys from the neighborhood, but he's such a great guy. And we were doing this film, and he was like, no, it's this, it's that. He's trying to get through this actor, and the guy's like, what do you want? And you want it bigger, weirder? He goes, I want it fucking real. And I was like, clearest direction I've ever seen of a scene. Yeah, man. How about that one, dude? Making it real. But no, it's fun. The fun thing too is who knows what's going to happen with Terriers. I would love, of course, for it to continue, and I think people will enjoy it. And they'll probably enjoy it even like a 13-part miniseries or whatever. But the adventure kind of hopefully continues. It's just like. It's fun to do a bunch of different things. It's fun to do like Jimmy McBride, little 1-minute interstitial improv things. It's fun to do big movies and cheesy dramas but what gets harder is to do stuff that feels like it's not compromised or super contrived or which is what's nice about I don't know because stand-up strikes me as that. But although you may feel that way in stand-up too sometimes.
That it feels contrived? Yeah, I mean there's a certain art to. When you first start doing stand-up, you're like, you get this gladiator mentality. You're like, I'm never going to do the same fucking bit twice. And you realize there's a genuine art to crafting and finding jokes and figuring out like what you're trying to say. Yeah. And then there's a whole other part of the evolution when you start doing an hour of the jump from 30 minutes to 45 minutes to an hour is insane. And then you really start to realize like, I never realized I needed to express all of these points, but somehow they've leaked into I write jokes about the South. I never was a guy who was like, I'm Southern. And,
Right.
Here I am just talking about these things that just needed to get out. So
Right.
sometimes it feels contrived, and you're like, am I really gonna do this laser vagina joke again tonight? But then you kind of just go like,
And yes, there is one.
there's a laser vagina joke.
That's
good,
a
but it
specific
works.
reference.
But I guess so. But the minute you can't express it from a real place, I think is the minute people just kind of like shut down because they're like, that's inauthentic now.
Then that's it. That's like take after take. Like if you can find the emotional connection between the material, then you're allowed to do whatever you're allowed to do. If it's just by rote after that, then. But I know I tried stand up a couple times, and the only time it was successful is if you go up and don't know what you're going to say at all. And then if you go
tried
up,
that once or twice.
I've done that once, and it worked kind of okay until I went back. They said, "Come back the next night." Yeah, cool. And I was like, "What did I talk about?" And I was like, "Who's up right now?" And they're like, "Chris Rock." And you're like, "There's no fucking." Not only do I not have an act, I'm trying to say what I said when I was free.
yeah.
Well, last guy was really good, wasn't he, folks?
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
Who? Yeah, exactly, dude. Who was that? Stank up the joint. Yeah, but I have so much respect for that. That is the art form. Because, I mean, even pre-microphone, all you need is you standing there and people on a plastic chair get transported anywhere through storytelling.
Chris Rock is one of those like hardcore, like Louis C.K. was telling me that, like driving to a gig, he's like, why are you listening to the radio in the car? You need to be focusing on your material.
wow.
You need to be focusing on what you're doing when you get there.
He just talks about like not even listening to anything when he's in the car. So that's a time where you can just think.
That's a time where you can think. Like it's all this really intense. And
But
then
what
you
if
kinda
that
go,
makes somebody else go crazy because they need
that's
to be
what- that's a
removed
problem.
because they need to be on a
Everyone-
roller coaster
He's
before
got
they go do
clearly
a show.
his mind.
Everyone's
He's got his
everyone's
intellect, and
chemistry is different.
and he responds different. He might want to just listen to some music pregame,
Yeah.
or whatever it is. But yeah,
But that's the thing that I was going to say I love about all three of you guys, because you're all such great stand-ups, is that what my biggest pet peeve with stand-up, and I don't do stand-up, is that that sort of inauthentic, like you get the sense that somebody was in their car on the way going, who am I? Who's my stand-up persona?
Boy,
And
you
it
just
really
can't-
is so uncomfortable. You smell it, you feel it, you taste it.
yeah, and
when
the
you're
vibe is dark too
and it's
sometimes
just-
but like even Kirk, like I would, I might have pushed him in the wrong direction, but my friend started stand up. He'd be like, my brother's a Navy SEAL. It's like, you don't have a fucking your brother's. You're a fucking liar.
yeah.
You're a liar. Do you really need to find
But
lies to
is-
base?
the best derailing heckle where you just get really
No,
honest.
you
Like,
don't.
You don't actually have a brother. You
But
can't
what?
come back
But I
from
think,
that.
and what I think, what I love about Kirk's stand-up now, and what I respond to about it, is that he just takes his time. Like that dude just
Yeah.
takes his time on stage and is just like,
Yeah. He's got
when
his
you
own
own
unique,
that,
his
you
own
know?
unique rhythms, and it's hard to believe that that's enough. And when I did it with him, and like you go to New York, so we were at this club, and they were like, "Hey, you want to jump up because people aren't here, and it's the end of the night, and you can do 20 minutes if you want." Assuming because you're on a sitcom that you do stand up.
Well, funny, how
Why don't you
comedy's all the same.
Why'd you get up there? Why'd you get up there?
Sure, why not? Then these like, let's go to stand up, let's go to this place or that place, and they're like, okay, you got to, I can let you do your 3-minute bit, like, dude. Define 3 and 5 minute bit to someone who has no act or whatever. It's like it's incredibly insane, but people are that methodical in that the early stages are so brutal
Yeah.
of stand up, but
I don't know how you guys do it. I
I guess you have to learn the
much.
rules to break them too. Like that's
Yeah.
another kind of
I always think it's a genetic defect. It's a weird thing. It is. It's a weird thing to, night after night want to get up and try to make a group of strangers laugh, and then when it doesn't go well, and everything inside you is like, wow, maybe I shouldn't do this anymore. You still want to get up and do it again. I just think that's a weird genetic thing.
What's weird to me a little bit, though, and the guys I respect a lot even, is at some point they almost look like they have to be like, I'm a professional weird comedy guy.
Mm-hmm.
I keep weird shit in my fridge. I go to bed at 1 in the afternoon. That's I have all these rules, and so I had a friend who was like a morning radio guy, and he met some of these guys who were really brilliant comics, who I think are brilliant. And he was like, I think they're brilliant. I've always been big fans, and they were like, who are you? And like, what do you do? And I do this morning radio, and they're like, oh, hey, rock, they wouldn't let this guy be human. They were like, how's Rollvember radio? At some point, you're like, hey, dude, I've always respected your comedy. You go fuck yourself, man.
Yeah.
I'll take you to the parking lot right now. Because everybody becomes fodder for their weird comic universe that they've
Right.
imposed upon you and you and you and you and you, and then the whole touch of humanity's completely gone. And if there's no heart, if there's no like wave of humanity that you're riding on, and it's just that, then it's empty too. So and I think that's the thing about like Richard Pryor, these people that were so mind-numbing, is that you knew that they had a huge heart, the deeply aching soul that was very human and very real, and not just super out there clever and but who knows? I mean, it'll go back and forth, but it's an interesting universe you guys wander through.
and I feel the same. I feel the same about you. I mean, like the few acting things I've done, it always feels very weird, like because it really forces you to try to understand who you are as a person and how to be able to figure out like how do I react and how would this react? I don't
It's cool though too when you do it and you do figure certain things out and it's completely counter to how they intended it in the script, but they're like, ooh, wow, I saw that there's a different truth to it from a lot of different angles. Yeah. And it's fun to start playing in there. And like the thing about Terriers was it was a world that we could actually really play, like think about those issues in, and as opposed to a lot of the jobs that we get as actors. So, that you guys recognize it is a huge. It really means a lot to both Michael and myself, to everybody on the show. And,
now, in conclusion, how do you describe the show to people when you're telling them like this is what the show is, just so we can tell people on the show here?
I think it's kind of a drama about two best friends who are in dire straits, who would do anything for each other, like just take a bullet for each other, like. And they bust each other. They're kind of everything to each other, even if the women are in or out or whatever it is. And it's like, it's kind of a buddy drama, And I can't use. They used a Butch and Sundance or something like that, but to me, it's almost like Don Quixote and Sancho Panza, like, and this guy who's going to back your play, no matter what your play is, whether you piss him off or not, But it's about that emotional connection between people, and because the weird thing about TV is, whatever it could be like, it can either be Freaks and Geeks or Saved by the Bell. They take place in the same place. It's just how effective is the writing and how effective is the, you're pitching a high school thing or whatever. It's just how human are the players involved in understanding how people interact with each other. It just has a big heart that way. And what I love about it is that I think that poignancy, the humor combined with the drama, is what has kind of tripped people out the most. I think those who are, really invested in the show. So,
well, just to let people know, Terriers, which we're TiVoing, is on Wednesday nights on FX.
And as the female in the room, I'm going to be the one who says, guys, there's something on it for everyone. Which is disgusting, but 100% accurate.
It is kind of, it's a horror, it's a funky one, but it feels like there's something
there
on it
is. You're going to respond to the action when it happens, or you're going to respond, if that's your thing, you're going because it's really well done.
Detectives.
You're going to respond, you're going to respond to, as a woman, you're going to respond to the relationships if you're pigeonholing yourself into being a woman who's mushy.
We fought for that too, and it's like the writers were good about that. It's like men know it's not like I don't know. Every time I talk to a girl, I just get I don't have emotions. I'm like, God, dude, that's the worst, most played out bullshit. Hey, it's like you know how to talk to women, okay?
Yeah. That moment.
And these guys have had sisters, they got moms, they got shit. They can talk to women, and men and women can talk to each other.
No, there's a moment where you are talking to his girlfriend about an issue she's having after something happens, and that moment where you're seeing the pain. I am really you should not have brought me here because I have vomited compliments about this show the entire time.
But that's what we want.
The moment when you are feeling. Simultaneously, you're feeling bad for her, you're feeling sympathy for her and empathy, you're feeling for your friend, you're feeling for yourself for being in this situation,
because
you're thinking about your own relationship and how it pertains.
Life is so messy. And what people don't understand, too, it's like this weird, like Sandra Bullock and Jesse James and this, or Tiger Woods, and, like shows like this are not unlike Life or Your Life with Friends or something. Like, dude, if my wife finds out this or whatever, and why? I don't know, man, she's perfect and I'm a piece of shit. And I'm like, what it is there's self-sabotage.
Yeah.
Or there's Tiger Woods. It's like, oh, you're a billionaire, you're 30, your dad's marched you out in front of like TV shows since you were 2, and now he's dead. And now what do you do, man? And you've never been like a 15-year-old being checked by your friends, just another guy in the Circle K parking lot.
Yeah.
There's a million issues going on with people. There's addiction, there's this, there's that. There's self-sabotage, there's I feel sorry for you, but I got to hold the line. And all these things go into play. And like when you do drama, that all has to play. And I don't understand when people make it so clear-cut.
Well, that's what's great about, I mean, that just kind of ties back to what's going on in cable, which is, I mean, I think in the extreme when it doesn't work, or what's sort of easy to make fun of about a lot of cable now, is that it's all about the flawed hero, it's all about the anti-hero, it's all about this person is an asshole, but you still like him because he's the center of the show.
Yeah.
And when it works, it's a lot more complicated than oversimplifying in that way, but it feels like the acknowledgement of that is so exciting and so invigorating. It's a really exciting time. It can be a really exciting time in television.
Even if it isn't watched by many people or whatever, if the one most cynical person in the world who's like, I've never seen it captured where it is those things that really catch you off guard emotionally or whatever, and if you can win those people over and just be like, you're like, dude, I hate contrivance as much as you do, and on everything else that you're doing when you're walking into a contrived corner and you're like, we're walking into this red flag, and they're like, don't worry about it, and then of course it comes out and you go, no, and when his character does this as if anyone would ever, and you're like, hey man, I was saying, like, we're sticking our asses out to get kicked. I think the same way, like as most people think critically in that regard, like to do it to where you're like, look, it wouldn't, maybe, or let's talk about it, or it's, and so I think what it does appeal to people who have a really kind of tough litmus test when it comes to like shows like this, and other people don't really. Sometimes I don't want to think so much, whatever.
Right.
I feel enough in my own, and it's partially true because I always have this fantasy that if you do stuff that really is like, they don't even look like guys that, there was some weird thing where John Hamm was on the. I was at the Emmys or something. He's all dressed up and slicked back, and like someone, I can't remember who it is, some kind of, God bless him, Queenie dude on E or whatever. He's going, now that's what a television star's supposed to look like. Glamorous?
Yeah.
And you're like, you know what? Fuck you. All right? But, so my thing would be like, oh, we kind of look like guys you might know, like from your hometown or whatever. And then people will really respond to that because they'll feel really, and they're like, no. They really respond to like, really impossibly good-looking people. And then Sofia Vergara, who I worked with on the Knights of Prosperity, she had access to all of Pablo Escobar's stuff in Colombia. She's from Colombia, and she had these tapes and all this. I'm like, what if they made in Colombia like a really gritty drama that was like really about this stuff, but you guys made it, and it was about the struggle, and the guys, they're brutal, but they're also loving. They build hospitals, and she goes, poor people in places like Colombia want to watch Dynasty. People don't want to watch. Yeah, the people don't want to watch. I can understand. Okay, I get it. People want to watch. like Joan Collins in a gown. I know I do.
That woman is an impossible bitch.
It's true though, because of where we live, I just want to escape that all the time, and I don't want to see more Botox, and I don't want to see tinier and tinier women and buffed up men, because I feel like,
I want all shows.
That feels
to be
like work.
Entourage.
That just feels like work.
Yeah, every show
to be on.
Entourage channel. Bunch of people I want to hang out with. Well, thank you so much for being here, Donal. That's awesome. So, listen, I know we've talked about this many times in this podcast, people, but fucking watch Terriers because it's an amazing show and it deserves to stay on because it's good. So
thank you.
Hopefully people will watch in our little podcast audience. And it was a genuine pleasure to meet you after all this time.
Likewise.
And listeners, thanks
for
for putting up with me because I really.
Jenna Barney, everyone.
No, I really shouldn't be here, and I'm excited that I got to come and cheer for the
Hardwick.
show.
This is Matt Myra. That's Jonah Ray over there. This is the end of the Nerdist Podcast. Do you want to say it?
No, it's all yours.
It's your line. You came up with it, though.
No, but you always like to say it.
Yeah, but it's your thing.
Enjoy your burrito.
Okay.
Nice.
Now leaving Nerdist.com.